Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on moving to and living in Portugal. It's part of a series covering several countries sponsored by global wealth management company Blevins. And if you're unsure what a global wealth management company does or why you might need their expertise, then that should become apparent as we navigate the financial considerations when leaving the UK and setting up your new life in Portugal. It's lovely to see the strong interest in today's webinar. Brexit may have provided a few extra hurdles to moving into the EU on a permanent basis, but it does remain a long-held dream for many. So today I'm delighted to be joined by two experts who can help us in the field of wealth management and also in visas and broader legal questions. So first of all, hello to Matthew Krystman of Blevins. Matthew, how are you?
Hi, very well, thank you. How are you?
Good, all good, thank you. What is it that you do, Matthew? Where are you based? What do you do? How do you kind of interact with people that we have on the call today?
Sure. Well, I'm based in Cascais, just outside Lisbon. I live in Lisbon. I've lived there for 20 years. And what we do at Blevins is that we offer really tax, investment and pension advice, cross-border pension advice for UK nationals either planning to move to Portugal or actually living in Portugal.
Okay, that's a precise summary. We'll dive down into a bit of detail. There's quite a lot behind that, isn't there?
There's a lot behind that, absolutely.
Yeah. Also, welcome to Vasco Barriera. Hello from Cuz Oliveira and Associates. Hi, Vasco.
Hello, Andy. Thank you, and thank you, Blevins for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you along with your specific expertise. So how do you help British people currently? What is it that you can do for our audience?
Well, I'm a partner at a Lisbon-based law firm. I was born here and I know my country very well. We've been working particularly with foreign clients in immigration subjects and foreign investment and with UK citizens a lot. Because, as you know, UK nationals tend to love this country, and historically we have a very strong relationship, and we provide legal advice, evidently, with our clients' investments here in Portugal.
Great. So, clearly two experts. Thank you, everybody who's on this webinar today for your time and your interest. We do hope to be able to answer your questions directly. You will see a Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, or you should do. If you would like to submit a question today, please just click that and send us in your question, and we will try to get round to those later on in the webinar. So we're going to stay true to today's subject, which is people making a permanent home in Portugal. You may already be there, or you may be planning to go, but it's for people planning to live there, Portugal. But just before we do, Vasco, could you just cover off the most significant change post-Brexit with regards to people with a holiday home there who are just looking to spend certain periods of time in Portugal at their home?
Well, first of all, as you may know, nationals of more than 50 non-European countries are exempt from applying for a visa to visit the Schengen area for up to 90 days. They are most commonly identified as visa waivers. UK nationals are, after Brexit, unfortunately, within this group. In fact, this program has been developed so that travelers from these countries can continue to travel visa-free, while at the same time improving border management and security across Europe. But this benefit, as others, has limits, unfortunately. The basic rule here is that a traveler is entitled to stay at the Schengen area for a maximum of 90 days within a 180 days period. Everyone knows this rule. It should be easy. Unfortunately, it isn't as easy as one may think a few times. So the question is how to make sure that you comply with this rule. First of all, you need to always have in mind the date of entry control in the Schengen area. Then you will need to count backwards a period of 180 days. For example, if your intention is to enter on August 1st, 2022 in the Schengen area, the period of 180 days started on February 1st, 2022. This means that you'll only be allowed in if you have not reached the maximum of 90 days within those last 6 months. In that scenario, if you had reached it, you would have to apply for a visa necessarily to be able to be back in. But let's assume that you have not traveled to the Schengen area for the past 6 months. then you'll be entitled to your 90 days, of course, after which you have to leave the Schengen area for additional 90 days in order to be able to return. I underline that this, of course, is logic and very easy to understand. However, there are cases, as I was mentioning at the beginning, that's where indeed the math is a little more complicated, particularly when an individual has been traveling back and forth for the last 6 months. These are the cases that require legal assistance and legal advice and a more thorough assessment, evidently. In regard to the consequences of overstaying the Schengen area, very briefly, typically the consequences of overstaying are the payment of a fine. It's the most often penalty for overstaying. The fine can be between 80 and 700 euros, 80 and 700, and can be applied at the time you enter or leave the country at the airport. If you do not pay the applicable fine, your next entry can be evidently rejected. There is the possibility of receiving an order to leave the country as well. However, our country is very flexible. Historically, I would say we're very tolerant towards immigration, and it's very rare to see an order to leave the country. Finally, I would underline only that the extension of your short-term visa is always possible and advisable, and the extension can be based on medical, professional, or business reasons, such as the real estate acquisition. For instance, if you're coming to purchase a property, you can extend it if you need it. In summary, this rule may require more attention than one may think, and as legal advisors, we're evidently well prepared to provide you all the guidance and legal support.
Fantastic, comprehensive answer. So people are law-abiding audience today. They could come for 90 days in total, or they could to and fro within a period up to 90 days, although, as you've explained, there are some complexities about that. That's wonderful. So that's for our regular holiday homeowners. Matthew, the minute one stays 180 days plus, then you're actually becoming resident or tax resident. Can you just explore tax residency for us and explain what's involved in that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, first of all, first thing to bear in mind is that the UK and Portugal operate split year tax treatment. So if in the middle of the tax year you're leaving the UK and coming to Portugal, then literally up until you leave the UK, your worldwide income and gains are taxed in the UK. But once you arrive in Portugal, those income and gains worldwide are taxed in Portugal. And it depends on those assets, depending how they're actually taxed. So, for example, if you've got UK shares or UK investments, then once you become a Portuguese tax resident, any income and gains from those arising are taxed in Portugal going forward. And it's the same if you've got UK pensions. If you draw down from those UK pensions once you're a Portuguese tax resident, then they are taxed. That drawdown is taxed in Portugal. Okay, you're taxed under this non-habitual residency regime, which I think we might come on to, but it's certainly very attractive on the pension side. But the one anomaly here is if you have UK property and you keep it once you've left the UK, if then you sell it later on or take a rental income from it, it's still taxed in the UK. You have to do a UK non-resident tax return, but there may be further tax in Portugal later on. So everything changes once you become a Portuguese tax resident, and Portugal becomes your tax base there. What I would recommend is to take advice before leaving the UK tax net and coming to Portugal, because there's a lot you can do before leaving the UK. It's a shame sometimes when people come to us once they've landed in Portugal, because there's a lot they could have done before leaving the UK tax net. Things like taking advantage of unused capital gains tax allowances before leaving the UK, taking advantage of possible pension commencement lump sums before leaving the UK tax net, because Portugal don't recognise pension commencement lump sums. And really, it's getting your ducks lined up, and also looking at what we call the UK statutory residence tests as a lever to making sure that you really long-term do leave the UK tax net and don't unwittingly fall back into the UK tax net. So there's a lot of planning around that and advice needed on that, and it's obviously something we do at Blevins Franks.
Yeah, so just picking up on that, I mean, it's quite a simple concept really, but for people starting out, it's just worth reiterating, you need to be tax resident somewhere, don't you, in some jurisdiction. So if you're leaving the UK permanently and going to live in Portugal permanently, then you're changing tax regimes, and those tax regimes have potentially different rules. For example, you referenced capital gains tax. Can you sort of outline why it might be important to potentially sell your property in the UK before you come to Portugal, or what might be the considerations that you would outline to a client of yours before they became tax resident in Portugal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first part of your question is, yes, you cannot be tax resident in two countries at the same time. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's clear. And the second point about capital gains tax, well, if you sell a UK property whilst you're still in the UK and it's your principal private residence, and of course you get principal private residence relief, and there's no capital gains on that. But once you've left the UK and it ceases to be your principal private residence, then there's possible capital gains on the sale of that UK property. Of course, if there's a gain there as well.
Okay. So I've decided to relocate. I come to you to discuss all these issues. I can see from questions coming in already. Let's jump and involve some of our audience. There's a lot of interest around pensions, which I guess is your bread and butter work. What's the tax status of an NHS pension? Is this slightly different to a state pension from the UK? What could you explain a little bit about those two questions? Ian Steele is asking about the UK state pension, and Christopher Jenkins, just a name check, is asking about the tax status of a National Health Service pension. Okay,
well, start with the UK state pension. Once you leave the UK, of course, you're still you can still take a UK state pension. It will be continues to be indexed as you go along in line with inflation. And a UK state pension, once you're a Portuguese tax resident, will be paid to you gross, and it will be taxed in Portugal. There'll be no retention at source in the UK. With an NHS pension, it is more complicated than that, and it depends. You're going to need more specialist advice. It's not something I can. Something I can cover on a call today.
Right. Yes. Okay. So is that just an anomaly, being NHS pension? There's just particular rules around it, are there?
Yeah. It really depends. I mean, one thing I can say is the one UK pension that's always taxed in the UK, always taxed at source, even when you've left the UK, is a civil service pension. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that are always taxed at source. However, the NHS side is more complicated and it requires a bit more.
Right. And Paul Lilly asks us about a UK personal pension then. Okay, we're moving away into quite specific areas there, but is potentially looking at taking funds from a UK personal pension, investing in commercial property, for instance, in Portugal. Is that something that you have clients looking to do?
Taking money from a UK pension and investing in commercial property in Portugal, well, if they're taking money out of a UK pension as a Portuguese tax resident, then under this NHR regime, the non-habitual residency regime, that anyone who has not lived in Portugal in the previous 5 tax years, then when they come to Portugal, they can apply for a special NHR status, which gives you a flat 10% tax rate on pension drawdown for 10 years. So you can take money out of the pension. Of course, you can invest in whatever you want. Yeah, I mean, once you've taken money out, you can buy what you want, including commercial property if you want. Yes. So
that's usually tax beneficial then, to be, I guess, crystallising and drawing down money from a UK pension whilst you under the NHR regime. Is that correct?
It is, but bear in mind, advice is needed on this, because once you take money out of any UK pension, it falls back into your estate for inheritance tax purposes. So it's not as simple as just getting the money out on the lower regime of 10%. You need to look at the whole financial planning aspects and your needs going forward, including inheritance tax and the like, because the money does go back into your estate for inheritance tax purposes. Remember, money inside, capital inside a pension is outside your estate for inheritance tax purposes. So the whole financial planning side needs to be looked at and needs to be reviewed as part of the advice that we give.
Sorry, just say that last sentence again. What sits outside your assets for estate planning? I missed that.
Monies inside pensions are outside your estate for inheritance tax purposes. Yes. Once you draw down from pensions, it might be tax favourable to take it down at 10%, but remember it goes back into your estate for inheritance tax purposes. So
got that.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to get a lot of questions on this. I can see more of them coming in. But Vasco, if somebody is in this position where they become tax resident, then they will need to have become resident or at least commenced a residency application and residency process. If I'm looking to move permanently to Portugal, in briefly, what are the visa options available to me? What's the route to being able to become a Portuguese resident post Brexit?
Well, there are many routes. However, for a retired individual living on his own income abroad in his home country or a country of origin, let's say, the most obvious and adequate option is the D7 visa. That is a special residence visa intended for retired citizens or for individuals living from income. Can be income from investments, dividends, interests, as freelancers, even as dependent workers with some particularities. But for retired individuals, the D7 is for sure the best option. And people ask many times if the golden visa is also an option. It is most certainly an option. However, the first thing to address is the distinction between these two types of visas, let's say. And the distinction between them, I would start by saying that the golden visa is not a visa, but a direct residence permit. In fact, a visa enables its holder to travel to a country. On the contrary, a golden visa, as it is a residence permit, will only enable you to stay at that country after issuing. Therefore, I would say that for a retired individual, this is also a good argument to come immediately with the D7 visa. However, what happens is that the main thing to have in mind is the minimum stay requirements and the difference between one and the other, between the minimum stay requirements at the D7 visa and at the golden visa. At the D7 visa, you cannot be away for 6 consecutive months at any given moment, or 8 months overall within the validity of each card, which is 2 years, the first card, and the second one, 3 years. On the contrary, the golden visa has very flexible minimum stay requirements. You are only obliged to be here 14 days every 2 years. So this is the main thing to be careful about. If your intention is to live in Portugal and retire in Portugal, the D7 visa is surely the best option. Because you will be able to comply with the minimum stay requirements and it is less costly. The golden visa, it's a special investment residence permit that requires you to undertake an investment. First of all, a significant investment. I can explain which are the most common types of investments, but you need to undertake an investment at least of 280K, 280,000, and then you need to pay substantial government fees for any member of the family. Per person, it's 6,000 just to get the residence permit. On the contrary, the D7 visa has a cost of roughly 260 euros. So these are all good arguments to go with the D7 visa if your intention is to change and to move to Portugal on a permanent basis. What is the D7 visa? Basically, it's a residence visa, as I told you, that will enable you to convert it into a residence permit and be here in Portugal. It will provide you all the benefits of working, of having access to the national health system, to have 5 years of residence permit and then apply for Portuguese citizenship. All these characteristics, which by the way are common to the D7 visa and to the golden visa, are there. So I would say that the D7 is always the preferable route. In terms of the golden visa, I don't know if this is interesting, but for individuals that perhaps are looking to come to Portugal, but do not think that they will be able to comply with the minimum stay requirements that I referred, the golden visa, as it only requires you to stay 14 days every 2 years, is more flexible, evidently. And in this regard, you have, just in summary, the main typologies of investment are the real estate investment, the investment fund option, and to incorporate a company, and finally to transfer 1.5 million euros. These are the most common ones, the ones that bring some return on your investment. The real estate has been the most common, and for individuals that are looking to retire, is the most adequate. However, since the beginning 2022, there was a legislative change that according to which the real estate investment in properties for housing purposes is no longer possible in the main urban centers. Lisbon, Porto, all the coast, the main cities in the coast of my country, and almost all the coast is not available anymore for properties for housing purposes. And this brings some difficulties. There are, however, wonderful places in Portugal still available, next to the coast, to the south of Lisbon as well, and they are available for this type of investment.
So just on that the options on the golden visa that you outlined in terms of bringing over a certain amount of money or investment, just to be clear, it's not all of those, is it? It's one of those that you would need to comply with to fulfill the requirements of a golden visa in terms of the opportunities available.
Yes, of course. You can choose one of those. You either invest in real estate or transfer 1.5 million euros.
And apart from the complexity about the areas where you're no longer able to do that with regards to real estate, are you allowed to do that in the guise of your domestic property that you're going to live in, or does it need to be an investment property?
No, it doesn't need to be an investment property. You can purchase a property, live there, and be eligible with that property be eligible for the golden visa. The problem here is that with this change in 2022, if you're buying a property for housing purposes, you need to buy it at a specific location. So to assess that is better to be thorough, or else there may be problems in the future.
And as you flagged up, the D7 is potentially far more straightforward for somebody who is looking to commit and spend their time in Portugal. Can you just briefly outline the requirements of people submitting an application for a D7 visa?
Of course, in terms of requirements, substantial requirements, basically you need to have an income. You need to provide evidence of having that income with official paperwork. So it can be, like I was saying, income from a pension, from investments, provided that it is available to you. It is advisable that that investment it is available, or at least it is determinable. And with that foundation, let's say, then you need to comply with other requirements that are not as important, such as having a place to stay here in Portugal. It can be either an acquired property or a leased property. You need to open a Portuguese-based bank account and transfer funds, sufficient funds. Depending on the number and the size of your family, it will be more or less, but it's always something within the 15 to 30K bracket, so it's not very substantial. And then, of course, there are many other small requirements that are more procedural. And in terms of procedure, by the way, it is an application that is undertaken with the consulate, with the Portuguese consulate in the UK. It is issued the visa within 60 days of the application being submitted. Then it is valid, the visa, for 120 days, after which you will have an appointment here to convert the visa into a residence permit. The first one, like I said before, it's 2 years, renewable for 3 years periods. At the end of the 5th year, you will be eligible for citizenship, if you want to apply for citizenship, evidently. And after having citizenship, then you won't need any further legal support for immigration issues.
Okay, so these visas then are clearly the pathway, a 2-year visa, then a 3-year visa that gives you the pathway then to get full residency, at which point the kind of cash requirements and visibility of all of that information drops away and you just become a Portuguese resident. Is that correct?
It is. Well, you become a resident after converting the visa into a residence permit at the beginning of the procedure.
Okay.
After becoming a resident, you need to be a resident for 5 years to become a Portuguese citizen.
And again, just for people starting out on this journey, this proof of income, this is a requirement to show that you're going to be able to be essentially self-supporting, that you have an income, you're not going to be a drain in any way on the Portuguese states. We're no longer members of the EU, so we have to prove this income. And I think it's fair to say that requirement is significantly lower than we've done similar webinars in Spain. And I think the requirement there is significantly higher than in Portugal at the moment. Do you have a figure of what people would have to have available? You gave a range there. What is that range based on, Vasco?
Yes, there are two things here. You need to have the income abroad, okay, and provide evidence of having that income. And the income must be the equivalent to, for one individual, to the minimum wage in Portugal, which is 705 gross, 705 euros gross. For an extra family member, for the spouse, it will be 50% of the minimum wage in addition to the minimum wage. And then for children, 1/4 of the minimum wage for each children, additional children. So it's not much. And then you have to open the bank account in Portugal and provide evidence of having the availability of money already here in Portugal with the same amount. Typically here, we advise our clients to have a 1-year income there available at the Portuguese-based bank account. So 1 year of income based on this criteria that I told you, 705 for the main applicant, and then half that amount for the spouse and 1/4 of that amount for each additional children.
When you refer to 705, that's euros, that's a monthly national.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So relatively modest. If my maths are correct there, you're coming in at under 20,000 euros for a family of 4.
Yes.
Yes, well under. Okay, good. Well, thank you. That's.
Of course, let me just underline this. It is always advisable to provide evidence of having more. It will strengthen your application. So this is something that we will discuss with the clients afterwards while preparing the application, of course.
And what sort of timeline do you have on this, Vasco, when you're working with British applicants? Matthew made the point about, as we say, a saying over here, we say getting your ducks in line. What do you advise in terms of preparatory time to get all this in place? Because it's an application, it's an important point. This application has to start in the UK whilst you're a UK resident. Is that right?
Exactly. I would advise a 2-month preparation phase. To undertake the necessary tax registrations here in Portugal, to open the bank account, to transfer the funds, to obtain the necessary documentation. All of that can be undertaken within 2 months. It's a reasonable period. And then we submit the application and wait for the approval that occurs within 2 additional months.
Okay. You surprised me a little bit earlier. You referenced potentially the D7 visa suiting people who might be freelance working as well. I wasn't aware that it could be applied to somebody like that. I have a question in from Bernadette Richardson. She said, I would like to carry on working as a freelance bookkeeper for my UK clients, but do that in Portugal. Do I register as self-employed when I arrive? Well, I think there's quite a lot behind all of this. What would that require a work visa, or what do you think could be Bernadette's best solution, Vasco?
Well, it's a complex question. Why? Because the Bernadette is already here in Portugal, so theoretically shouldn't apply for a visa abroad. Therefore, the only instruments available are the ones that are here in Portugal, and there is an adequate residence permit for freelancers here in Portugal. It is, however, a very complex procedure that is taking 2 years or more, unfortunately. So the D7 visa route is always more advisable. Just to answer the initial part of your question, the D7 visa historically is based on passive income. So income from pensions, income from intellectual property, from investments. However, it has evolved at the side of the law, and regardless of what's written, the consulates have accepted and accept now other sources of income, active sources of income, from freelancer activities, from even work contracts. In these cases, as it is more particular and it's not written in law, there is a procedure that we undertake to make sure that the application is successful, and it is always successful.
Oh, that's interesting. So this term that gets thrown around, digital nomad, the D7 could apply for somebody looking to set themselves up in Portugal, working on that basis. Are you saying this would be for revenues driven outside of Portugal? It would need to be income from overseas clients?
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Okay. Matthew, are you meeting an increasing number of people who want to carry on servicing clients in the UK and live in Portugal and work out what their tax affairs should look like?
Yeah, we are meeting people that are wanting to sort of whole digital nomad side, and are wanting to see really where they should be paying tax and how many days they should be spending in Portugal or not. So yeah, well,
that's good. And I think it answers Jane James's question as well. She said, I have a limited company delivering virtual training registered in the UK. I want to carry on this business virtually in Portugal with my husband and no dependents. Is that doable on a D7? Well, I think, Vasco, you're saying with the right advice, possibly from your good self, that probably is.
Yes, for sure.
Excellent. Okay. On the D7 then, Matthew, a lot of people, unlike Jane, are not looking to work. You know, they're completely retired. Therefore, that means they're likely to be considering planning for inheritance planning and wills and all that side of things that we have to face at some point. How do you operate in that sphere? What sort of work do you get involved in there? You referenced it earlier, but let's go into that a bit more deeply.
On the inheritance side.
Yeah, on the inheritance planning. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the whole sort of, it's called estate planning. Can be
estate planning. Thank you.
Exactly, can be broken into two areas. The first part is succession. Succession meaning passing assets to the next generation. Portugal has forced heirship rules, and the UK you can freely dispose of assets. So there is planning needed around that, around succession planning when people move to Portugal. When they're looking at their legacy, they need the right advice to make sure that they can dispose of the assets and pass assets, the right assets, into the right hands upon their demise. Okay, that's the first side of things, succession. And the second side is the taxation around succession, which is called inheritance tax. Now, as a lot of us know, the UK inheritance tax is fairly onerous. It's 40% above your nil rate band. Whereas in Portugal, for people that want to bequeath assets to direct family members, there is no inheritance tax on that. And there's no stamp duty on inheritance tax on either of that. So it's 0%. So if we look at the two jurisdictions there, Portugal is a place to move to for long-term planning, to be passing assets to the next generation, and to use the possibility of obtaining a Portuguese, what is called a domicile of choice, because inheritance tax is around domicile. There's a lot of planning involved in that, and a lot of potential tax savings for the next generation for retirees moving to Portugal.
What a great place to die.
Exactly.
What was the term you used at the top of that? Was that forced
heirship?
Yeah, can you just explore that for us?
Yeah, so in Portugal, it comes from something called the Napoleonic Code, that Portugal has forced heirship, that upon your demise, for Portuguese nationals, there's a certain percentage that has to go to the spouse and the children, and only a certain percentage of the estate that can go to freely disposed. Whereas, of course, as UK nationals, we can freely dispose of our assets, and it's actually something to in terms of wills. Going back to Vasco here, but when UK nationals are moving to Portugal, and if they have assets here in Portugal with their wills, they should be looking at nominating their law of nationality, which is the law of England and Wales, or the law of Scotland, of course, rather than the law of Portugal in terms of heirship. So that is more of a legal matter rather than the financial planning aspect. But that's something to bear in mind, that when you move to Portugal, if you own assets in Portugal, you should be looking at your wills again.
Okay, Vasco, is this something you get involved in as well? You get people to write wills locally once they become resident?
Definitely, particularly when they purchase property, registered property, real estate, or any other registered things, products such as cars, boats. It's always advisable to have it. Why? Because, like Matthew was saying already, we have strict inheritance rules, our own specific rules that may not be in accordance with the wishes of an individual relocating to Portugal. And one may think that because he has a will abroad, that will be enforceable in Portugal, but that will not be the case. Why? Because we have a EU regulation that foresees that the applicable law of succession is the law of the last residence of that individual, unless he expressly indicates the law of the country of origin. What this means is that, let's say, a retired individual, a citizen, comes to Portugal, moves to Portugal and establishes here his residence. He has a UK will disposing freely of his assets to one of his children, let's say, and he does not register here a will. In that scenario, regarding the assets here in Portugal, the applicable law will be, under this EU regulation, the Portuguese law. And the consequence will be that the assets will be divided equally between the two children, if there is no spouse. If there was a spouse, let's say that there was a spouse, a survivor, a spouse that had survived the deceased, and two children. In that scenario, it wouldn't be an equal division. It would be 50% for the spouse, and then the other 50% divided equally between the children. These things advise, of course, individuals relocating to Portugal and that have purchased property to have a will, evidently. In addition, there are many procedural aspects that also are in favor of this solution. Even if there is consistency between the wishes of the deceased and the Portuguese legislation. And those procedural aspects are things as simple as the fact that you will need to enforce here, the heirs will need to have legitimacy here in Portugal. If you do not have a will here in Portugal, the heir's job will be much more difficult administrating the assets, and it will take them a long time, and sometimes they will find significant problems to get a hold of the assets and even administering the assets. So these reasons are sufficient for some to undertake the will, to do the will, and of course we're very experienced with this and available to provide guidance.
Great, thank you. We've got a few questions in from people who already own property in Portugal. Well, two different scenarios. One not living there, but I guess you can't, I guess, Vasco, use a property that you've owned for, say, 8 years and retrospectively try and use that for a golden visa. Is that something that's possible or not if you already own a property?
That's a very interesting question, to which even the most experienced lawyers didn't find a good answer. It is a part of the law that is obscure, it doesn't exist any disposition, any rule in this regard. I would advise against it, to be honest. I would say that within a reasonable period of 1-2 years, it's something that it's feasible, and we have experienced it. More than that is dangerous. Although, legally speaking, I would say that provided that investment in particular is in accordance with the current legislation and with the legislation that then was in force, it will be accepted. But it's a very complex question.
Okay, it's a grey area. Let's leave it at that for now.
Yeah.
Just to clear up a few questions from people who, again, as I've said a couple of times, might be new to this, and we are going through quite a lot of information thick and fast. So, Christopher Jenkins, if you become tax resident, are there restrictions in terms of buying a property near the coast? No, you're kind of conflating two different things there. Tax residency is one thing. The buying the property in particular places that Vasco outlined is a restriction within the golden visa. That was right, Vasco?
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you have tax residency or not. What matters is the location of the property.
Yeah. Derek Wallace, if I can answer your question. If we looking to move to Portugal for the purpose of buying property, how long can we stay? Is it 90 days or is it the D7? Well, the 90 days, Derek, is 90 out of 180 days. That is all you can stay. And there's a slightly more complex formula behind that, but essentially it's 90 out of 180 days. If you're looking to live there for a longer period than that, you apply for a D7 visa. That's one of the options, as Vasco has explained, with a move to becoming fully resident in a 5-year period. But at that point, you become tax resident, and that's where your tax affairs are based and where you will be taxed. Rental income from outside of Portugal. I think you said that qualifies as proof of income, Matthew, for a D7 visa. Is that correct?
Well, that's Vasco's error, not mine.
That's
but as far as I know, yes, it would be, wouldn't it?
It does. Definitely, yes.
Rental income's good. But, oh, that's right. Sorry, I thought of you, Matthew. But the rental you said was taxed in the UK?
Correct. It's taxed in the UK. If you have non-habitual residency, there's no further taxation in Portugal. However, if you're not an NHR status, then there could be further taxation in Portugal.
Okay. And NHR then, do you just want to explain a bit about that status and how one might acquire it?
Yeah, NHR was brought in 2009 in Portugal, basically to attract more people, more wealthy retirees or working people to Portugal, and also to actually attract Portuguese people that emigrated back to Portugal. So the idea is if you haven't been resident in Portugal in the previous 5 tax years, when you move to Portugal, you can apply for, at the same time as tax residency, this special NHR status that lasts for 10 years. And this gives you favorable tax treatment on a number of areas. And the first one is pension drawdown. It's taxed at a flat rate of 10% for 10 years. So I mentioned that earlier. Also, overseas investment income is taxed, well, is in fact not taxed for 10 years. And for those people coming and working, people with high value added work, then under NHR status, they would have a flat 20% income tax rate, which is pretty attractive. NHR doesn't offer any tax exemptions for capital gains. So if you're holding overseas investments, NHR does not give you any tax exemptions. However, Portugal, like the UK and like many other Western European countries, offers qualifying investments that, in a sense, provide tax breaks. So in the UK, those qualifying investments are ISAs. In the UK, you can wrap investments in ISAs and they can act as capital gains tax shelters. Portugal has their own version of these. They're not called ISAs, but Portugal have its own version of qualifying investments where you can wrap investments in something tax favorable for Portugal and draw down in a more tax efficient income and mitigate some of those capital gains liabilities. It's something that we advise on in Blevins Franks.
That's cool work for you. Okay. Ian Steele asks, your NHR tax status is not lost or compromised in any way by getting a D7 visa, is it, Vasco? It's just part and parcel of the same process.
Yes, it's not the same process, but it's something that is independent and autonomous, but one does not affect the other.
Yeah. Holly Pugh, just clearing up something for you. Yes, you can buy property in Portugal without being resident. If you just, as you said, you're looking to use it 90 out of 180 days. Exactly. That's the area we touched on at the start. That's for holiday home buyers. You need certain things in place, but no, you don't need to become resident to buy property in Portugal. You can have your holiday home. A few questions coming in from people who are, well, the couples are, one of them is UK citizen and the other one is an EU citizen. Vasco, are you aware of the situation there? If, say, somebody here is married to a Portuguese and they want to relocate to Portugal, what's the situation then for a spouse of a Portuguese national?
It is that there is a specific procedure. In that case, the D7 won't be necessary. The procedure that will be applicable will be a registration, a family reunification procedure with a citizen of the European Union that is a Portuguese citizen. There is, in the case of Portuguese citizens with a spouse that is a non-EU national, there is a complication of our system, unfortunately, that obliges the applicants to register and acknowledge here the marriage between them to prove the family link. So it is a complex procedure, perhaps even more complex than the D7. Unfortunately, it's what we have, and we can here help you deal with it, of course.
Okay, thanks, Vasco. On the question, Matthew, that I asked earlier on about the golden visa and retrospectively applying a home that had been owned for 8 years, just reminded me that you also work with a lot of British people who have been resident in Portugal for some time. How is it that you get involved with them? What sort of different things do you get involved in, or is it the same stuff to be looked at from people planning a move who've not yet come?
No, because at Blevins Franks, we covered in this webinar what we do for people leaving the UK tax net. But at Blevins Franks in Portugal, we've got 2 offices, one in Cascais, just north of Lisbon, and one in the Algarve, where we've had a presence here for many, many years. And we provide ongoing financial planning advice in the areas of taxation, investments. We manage and advise on tax-efficient investment portfolios for people looking for either income or growth. And we advise on pensions. So UK nationals moving to Portugal, some of them keep their UK pensions, but some of them actually move them to something called qualifying recognised overseas pension schemes, which is quite a mouthful, CUROPs in abbreviation, which are basically EU personal pensions that are more suitable for them going forward. So we provide analysis, advice on those, and we provide ongoing management on those as well, on these both pensions and investments from our branch offices here.
Great. Okay. And for people planning the move, when do you typically start talking to them? What's an ideal timeline? Vasco gave us a 2-month lead time roughly for a D7 visa. When do you start working with people who are planning to move lock, stock and barrel with family and the whole thing to Portugal? What's an ideal starting point?
Much further point. I mean, I had a conversation at a Teams meeting this morning with somebody who was 2.5 years away from moving. So that obviously is just the conversation stage. But anyone from, a year and a half away, we can look at strategic financial planning with them, looking at what asset base they have, how that would be taxed in Portugal, what they should do before leaving the UK, stuff I mentioned earlier. But we can start that process. We can start the process easily a year before, because you don't want to start just a few months before looking at this, because it would be too much of a rush. So it's better to be looking at that the year before really moving.
Okay, I had a question here. Does Blevins Franks just advise British people moving overseas? I've got a question here from a Dutch person looking for advice. Is that that's not a jurisdiction then?
Well, we're not licensed and regulated in Holland, so we cannot advise somebody on the Dutch and leaving the Dutch tax system. But if there's a Dutch national moving to Portugal and they're here in Portugal and they're looking for an investment, or if they have British pensions and pension advice, then of course we can provide that advice. Okay,
great. A question here that I would just read through, if you both just listen in, from Richard Sykes. Hello, myself and my wife are retiring and we're looking to move full-time to Portugal in October, renting for a year with a view to buying property late 2023. We're about to start the D7 application process. We passed the income fund tests comfortably, but it sounds like the stage 1 process may not be complete by the end of September, when our short-term rental in London expires and we're looking to move out to Portugal. Can we enter Portugal under the 90-day visa waiver scheme? then re-enter formally as D7 residents in late 2022 once stage 1 is complete? That's quite a technical question. You'd probably be charging for this sort of information normally, Vasco, so sorry for that, but would you like to cover off that one?
Well, unfortunately for me, I don't charge many times for that type of information.
Okay, oh, you're a very generous guy.
No, yes, I am a generous person. It is a tricky and complex situation, but there is always a way of assuring that the process moves forward. I would be happy to follow up and clarify in more detail.
Yeah, it's quite a specific set of circumstances, but thank you for your question, Richard. Great. Well, that is all that we have had time for. Do have time for today. You will have seen, all of you, various messages coming through from a colleague. We will send you out email contact information both for Vasco at Cuz Oliveira and Associates, law firm in Portugal, and of course for Blevins Franks. If you would like a Blevins Franks guide to living in Portugal, there's a free PDF of the guide available by emailing enquiries at blevinsfranks.com, enquiries at blevinsfranks.com. You can also go to their website, which is blevinsfranks.com, and if you go under the news and guides section, you can also download that guide directly from there. Blevins Franks themselves will also be at our exhibition at the NEC Exhibition Centre in Birmingham, 23rd to the 25th of September. We'll have over 100 estate agents, lawyers, wealth management specialists, a full seminar program, plus the stars of the TV show that you'll surely recognise. They will all be along there for the 3 days of the Birmingham exhibition. So I do hope that we've been able to cover off a good number of your questions today. This is quite nitty-gritty stuff to get to grips with here, but it is vital stuff for you to make a new life for yourselves in Portugal. And why would you not want to? What a wonderful place to live. So thank you very much, Matthew, for your time.
Thank you, Andy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you for everybody who's joined us today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.